Welcome to Contra Vento Podcast, where we talk with nomads, immigrants, entrepreneurs, and international investors to help you live a borderless life. As you may notice, we're not talking in Portuguese today. Today is going to be our inaugural episode in English. I'm Francisco Litvai, your host, talking from Bucaramanga, Colombia, one more time. And today our guest is Joseph McKinney, CEO of the Catawba Digital Economic Zone, the 51st jurisdiction in the United States with regulations tailored to the digital assets industry. He's also the founder of the Great Startup Societies Foundation and co-author of Founding Startup Societies, a practical how-to book for entrepreneurs who want to develop private special economic zones. And a personal friend also. Joe, how are you doing? Where are you talking from?
Bom dia a todos. Doing good. I'm here in the Carolinas, pretty smack dab right between North and South Carolina, which happens to be around the jurisdiction of the Catawba Indian Nation. Thank you for having me on the show.
My pleasure. So, for those that don't know anything that I just read in the bio, founding startup societies and Catawba, etc., could you give us a brief overview into how you got into this world of private special economic zones before we really dive into the specifics?
Yeah, totally. So, startup societies, generally speaking, which is the organization I founded, I can talk about that a little bit, is any form of experimental governance on a small scale. One of the most prolific examples of this is a special economic zone. A special economic zone is an area within a host jurisdiction that has different policies, rules, regulations, sometimes taxes that are meant to attract companies and residents to physically reside there. There, about 3/4 of all countries have them, about 5,400 around the world. And some of them have had tremendous success. Famous examples include Shenzhen in China, which was a fishing village of about 30,000 people and now has a population of 18 million and the same GDP as Portugal, Ireland, or Vietnam and Argentina. Also Dubai, it was, very undeveloped prior to creating 40 different special economic zones. And now all your buddies brag that they visited a conference at this world city. And that was within a span of a couple decades. So, that's essentially what we study. And ours initially is going to focus on digital industries, but we're also scaling to real estate as well.
Fantastic. And then in the Startup Societies Foundation, your work was basically to help promote these different kinds of jurisdictions and
Exactly.
and
So me and my co-founder, we heard about all these examples and we thought they were really cool. Initially, we were all very interested in politics and policy, but we quickly grew disenfranchised and realized none of it would work. If you all are familiar with the concept of public choice, it's the idea that institutions are so entrenched because of special interests that it's practically impossible to make meaningful change on the traditional electoral level. But entrepreneurs, were able to make significant positive change, like Uber and Airbnb, and then Bitcoin as well. But special economic zones are kind of the furthest extension of that, where they literally have an area in conjunction and partnership with a host government to have different policies and try them out on a small scale. But the problem that we saw is, especially a lot of the more ambitious projects, is that they kept making the same mistakes. They kept acting in isolation. There wasn't a common network of people seeing themselves as an industry, and there weren't real established best practices that were developed. So we thought, okay, well, maybe we should just make an organization, or at the very least a blog, where we detail all of this. And it quickly shot up. Started out as a simple blog and podcast, but then scaled to trade show conferences. We opened up the only peer-reviewed journal for the study of special jurisdictions and special economic zones, called the Journal of Special Jurisdictions. We released that how-to guide book, co-written by myself and, more importantly, Mark Fraser, who is kind of the grandfather of this movement, who's been doing these types of projects since the 60s. Just a lot of pop content to connect everyone together.
Yeah, it's really. I highly recommend the book, by the way, for anyone that is interested in special jurisdictions and maybe trying something out yourself. That's definitely a must read. And so One thing that I like to touch upon in your personal journey is how you made the transition from the nonprofit world to the okay, let me do my own project now, right? Because in the nonprofit world, you did basically like everything that can be done in that world, like a journal, a book, the conference, all the different kinds of materials for sharing an idea, which I think a lot of our own audience does as well, right? I think we have a lot of people in the audience who are part of libertarian think tanks or study groups or nonprofit organizations and trying to, like bring freedom ideas further. But, how was how did this end up happening that you went on a for-profit project and try to, okay, let me do it on my own now?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of happened organically. So while, especially when we started getting more developed with startup societies, we started to get approached by people who wanted, for-profit consultation. And because of, built up this network and expertise over the years, been starting to help. So we really started hustle with everything regarding especially economic zone industry, whether it's consulting on policy or land use or integrating technology into it, or even something as banal as how to connect foreign trade zones and supply chains and what have you. You just started consulting on all those different aspects, and we developed a practice. And like any consultancy group, you start to develop a pipeline over time. And then I actually got contacted by a colleague of both of ours, Tom W. Bell, who is a director over at the editor at large of the Journal of Special Jurisdictions. And he got called because of someone read his book, Your Next Government from Nation States to Stateless Nations. Because someone on the Special Economic Zone team of Catawba, was asking him for advice. And Tom said, I don't really know if this will be something, Joe, but you should check it out. And initially, I was pretty skeptical about it. Most people that are, in the United States and was taught about Native American tribes in the United States kind of assumes that they don't have real sovereignty, that they're paper tigers. And I was one of those people. And I looked into it very skeptically. And after I came up for breath, after a couple of weeks of research, I realized I was totally and completely wrong. Tribes do have real sovereignty. And for sort of like an analog, they have at least the same regulatory and legislative authority as a U.S. state in regards to commercial law, corporate law, and business regulations. So with that in mind, I realized there could be a really big opportunity there. And I knew that, we wanted to be mindful of land, and we also wanted to focus on industries and business models that were highly scalable, that, an investor would be able to see like, okay, there's low marginal cost of acquiring a new customer, kind of like a SaaS model, you can grow exponentially. So I thought, okay, why don't we focus on industries that kind of operate as governance as a service, so to speak, in those types of exponential industries. So we thought, okay, why don't we focus on company incorporation and chartering for digital companies? And then we thought, well, what is the market that's most underserved within that niche? And and that's also within the Catawba's jurisdictional authority. And we thought very clearly fintech, digital assets, and other exponential technologies. So we initially focused on that. We developed a business plan, and we secured a joint venture with the economic development arm of the Catawba Indian Nation. And I moved down here personally with my co-founder and wife Natalie Meza Garcia, who has a PhD in special economic zones. And we moved down here personally to engage with the nation's leadership, as well as their attorneys, to develop a legislative package. But more importantly, we engaged directly at the grassroots level, meeting with tribal elders and heads of families, just beating them multiple times a week at all you can eat buffets and coffee shops and what have you. Just sitting down with printed material, explaining step by step what a special economic zone is, what the business model is, and how it directly positively impacts the Catawba Indian Nation. And using that, we actually created, I would think, actually the first grassroots movement in support of a special economic zone project. And they actively lobbied their government in order to secure a special session of their nation's legislature to pass it. And that was passed on February 19th of 2022. Since then, we've created our own regulatory body, and that regulatory body has passed numerous regulations concerning digital assets, DAOs, and now banking. And you can register a company today. So that's a 10,000-foot view. I'm sure there's a lot of questions and granularities you'd like to get into.
Absolutely. So, in in terms of how the structure is found, I really like how you said it's a grassroots movement, because our latest podcast was with Sebastian Almeida, who's a Brazilian living in Prospera, and there was the total opposite, right? It's some people lobbied with the government. The government made a constitutional reform that no one actually knew what that was about. No one really was vouching for it, and now we're having the whole problem with a new government trying to overturn it and destroy it. So I quite like that your initial instinct was to go there and talk to people and, buffets and cafes and bring the popular support before trying to implement it with the people who who can make the decision, right? I think that's necessary for the long-term viability of the project. And so just so people have a clear picture here, Catawba is an Indian tribe that is located within two American states, right? The two Carolinas. But then Catawba is also the name of the special economic zone.
Well, the specific name is the Catawba Digital Economic Zone. The actual legal name is the Green Earth Zone because it refers to a specific property on the reservation. But people got very confused because they thought we were an environmental services company. So the DBA is the Catawba Digital Economic Zone.
Makes sense. And then this is important to understand also, right? So this is not a special economic zone that is aiming to be territorial, right? It's not like, oh, build your factory here. It's more thinking of the digital realm. It's, that's why it's the name digital economic zone.
Our initial focus was on that, but so the beautiful thing about tribal nations and the Catawba specifically is that you can put additional land into their jurisdiction through an established process. So there are property owners that actually own very large factory buildings and manufacturing facilities that actually want to put some of that land into trust to build an industrial park or what have you. But for your users, that's probably not as interesting to hear about right now. And most of our work to this point has been on the digital front and incorporating digitally and chartering financial institutions remotely.
And I think that begs the question then, right? So any Indian tribe can end up creating their own LLCs with their own legal framework. Like, how come this has never been done before? Is it really a case of like just joining the right ideas with the right expertise at the right time? Like, have there been prior attempts at something like this?
Yeah, so it is kind of combining those things together. I mean, tribal LLCs, they're actually a commonplace thing that have existed for many decades, possibly even hundreds of years. And well, not hundreds of years because if an LLC is not that old. But the point being, they're very old. Even the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they actually list, corporate template laws for Indian nations to actually pass. But the big thing is, for one, it's just a lack of knowledge in special economic zones and the specific framework. So having partners to deal with that. But also, it's up until this point, tribes themselves, they haven't been acting as governments for, what they call in the SEZ space, foreign direct investment. They themselves have sort of been the business. They have been working on, providing, gaming or gambling or what have you, or payday lending or, cannabis or what have you. But to create a structure, a legal infrastructure for a government, that's a little bit different. And also, there's sort of a cold start problem because most people, when they think about doing business within a legal jurisdiction, they don't think about Indian tribes. They think about Delaware, they think about Nevada, they think about Wyoming. So having all those ideas in mind and the expertise to combine the idea of special economic zones, digital assets, and everything like that, as well as bring capital to make that happen, so that's hadn't happened before, and it happened in 2022.
Awesome. And so let's go more in detail on how the whole structure works. So currently on the Catawba website, like I'm sure we'll pull it up here. I'll leave the link on the comments also so everyone can see it. You are able to incorporate different kinds of structures, including one that I think has a very catchy name, which is the DAO LLC, right? What are the differences there between a regular LLC in a normal, in a U.S. state and an LLC incorporated within Catawba?
Yeah, so a DAO LLC, the main impetus behind that is that DAOs, up until this point, they've been operating kind of as general partnerships, which is extraordinarily problematic from a liability standpoint. Um, and I know this is legally complex, but so a general partnership, there is no limited liability with corporations. There's a certain amount of liability that the corporation has, but that's not given to the individual directors or part of the company. And as a
Hmm.
consequence of that, if they're operating as a general partnership, that means that for all debts, whether that's, taxes or fines from a government, or even just civil disputes with other private parties, that is borne infinitely on the assets of each individual, which has been disastrous for a lot of people. So what they've been doing is that they've been trying to create a system that allows for DAOs to still operate as DAOs and have flexibility and refer to their digital system, their blockchain based system as their form of governance while fitting within that legal liability standpoint. So first and foremost, this sort of allows you to rely on your internal governance and have that recognized of your blockchain governance as sort of the format that is allowed under an LLC. So that's number one. And two, provide sort of low barrier entries to do that LLC model because there's been examples like Wyoming, which requires that you have to have a certain amount of proposals in order for you to actually be a viable DAO LLC, or they require you to put your public key to your smart contracts within your articles of incorporation. But that's very difficult because of, as you're probably familiar, a lot of DAOs are mostly, Discord groups at a certain point, when they're a startup DAO, so they don't have that. So we allow for you to, put like the URL, for instance, of your white paper, what have you, just so you're demonstrating and you're disclosing exactly how your governance is. So yeah, we're providing the best of both worlds in terms of a DAO LLC. We also provide a way for you to do dispute resolution directly on chain, borrowing from Tennessee. So we're really improved there. In addition to that, we have another DAO model. We were the first jurisdiction to officially pass a DUNA, which is a DAO unincorporated nonprofit association. So an unincorporated nonprofit association is a legal entity type that's existed for a number of years. It's been adopted by most U.S. states. Um, Unlike an LLC, it's not an incorporated entity. It's kind of like a general partnership. It's very, loose. You're almost deferring entirely to the governing principles of your UNA rather than any statutory requirements. And this is kind of better for a lot of DAOs that are looking for that native flexibility. Um, but at the same time, they have the benefits of an incorporated entity because they do have limited liability. You can get an EIN, you can do contracts, you can get a bank account. In fact, you can even apply for 501c3 status under US law, which, if you're not familiar, this is a nonprofit status. So we have two different entity types, and we haven't launched the DUNA one yet because of what we need to do is first issue a DID, which is a decentralized identifier and a verifiable credential, because that would be the requirement to set up a DUNA. Every one of your person of your DAO has to have a DID and VC. We currently have that in staging, so we should be launching that within the next couple of weeks.
And I really like the approach that you put there, right? Of, oh, we took this best part of the regulation from this state, we took this part of the regulation that was nice from that state, and we kind of put it together. Do you have other examples of, how the Catawba regulations are better than other places? Not talking about, like incorporation time that's very fast, or the not having the franchise tax, etc., but really in terms of doing business, how are your regulations different?
Yeah, well, so there's a systemic basis of it all, and that's yeah. So I love how you talked about that. We are borrowing or stealing or however you want to call it from the best jurisdictions because you should not be making things whole cloth because of attorneys and businesses they like to rely on good rules and regulations. But the problem is not one jurisdiction does it completely right. So it's best to get the best mix from everywhere. And what you can do is you can create the best. But from a systemic basis, why we will always win is because of speed. For one, there's a sort of the profit incentive with the for-profit special economic zone to always be quickest to market. But also, our regulatory body is governed by five extraordinary Catawba citizens that meet every couple of weeks, sometimes even more frequently, like as of late. So by the time that other jurisdictions like Wyoming or others are putting out for comment a particular digital asset or other regulation, we can adopt it before they go to recess, potentially. So we're always going to be ahead of the curve. And one example how we, mix and match to be ahead of the curve is actually on our digital asset regulation. So there was a problem back in 2018, 2017 that a lot of companies that dealt in digital assets, they weren't quite sure how they were classified under existing law. And while, a lot of entrepreneurs don't like to think about these types of things, one thing that you always have to consider, and the reason why Delaware is so important, is how do you deal with disputes? If there is a dispute about the assets of a company, how will those assets be treated? If you are mortgaging or not mortgaging, if you have collateralized debt using, digital assets as collateral, who is the owner of that property, what have you? How does that fit within the Uniform Commercial Code, which is a commercial code that exists across the U.S. state? So this was a big problem. And normally what you would rely on is the Uniform Commercial Code, which exists across U.S. states. But at that point, there wasn't consistent rules about how digital assets fit under there. So what Wyoming did is that they created specific definitions that didn't change the UCC. They changed the Wyoming Property Code that gives specific definitions. And this specificity was very important to allow for people to feel comfortable with digital assets in Wyoming versus elsewhere. But the problem with it is that it did not incorporate with the UCC, which is consistent across U.S. states. So it was kind of like taking tape and glue to their property code in order to make it work. And then the Uniform Law Commission, which is a private organization that publishes these different template acts for the UCC to be adopted by U.S. states, they eventually adopted their own version, which we were the first to actually adopt to our jurisdiction. But the problem is that it has a lack of specificity. It has what they call an electronic controllable record, which is sort of a catch-all phrase that is meant to encapsulate all of digital assets. But the problem it still left a lot of ambiguity about, which, how is an NFT treated versus a virtual fungible token? Or is there a difference in a utility token and also in a virtual currency or what have you? So there was still confusion. So what we did is the best of both worlds. We adopted the Wyoming set of definitions while also being the first jurisdiction to adopt the Uniform Law Commission's amendments to the UCC. As a consequence, we have both of those overlaid on top of each other, creating the most robust system for protecting and defining digital asset property for companies in the United States and, as a consequence, arguably around the world.
So I think this is important to point. This is not only for people who, let's say, are creating a crypto protocol, but also people who are using crypto within their business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like even if you just have a treasury or if you want to trade every once in a while. In fact, we haven't made a public announcement about this yet, but if you want to, you can actually set up a Kraken account and you can be able to associate through this central exchange digital assets and have that as a treasury. So even if you just hold digital assets, not that you're necessarily making a digital asset, this will benefit your company.
Awesome. And we talked a lot about digital assets here, but are there any other fields in which you see that Catawba really goes ahead with the regulations? I know that you guys mentioned a lot of the financial sector in your website as well. Like, what's the?
Love the segue. So we as mentioned before, tribes have the same status as a U.S. state in regards to commercial law, business regulations, and what have you. And in the United States, they have what they call a dual banking system, where there's federally chartered institutions chartered by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, as well as state chartered institutions, where a state can then charter and regulate a financial institution. So as equivalent to a state, we create a system based off of that mixed and matched, the best of U.S. states. So we borrowed from Wyoming the pieces about digital assets and what have you, though we have our more robust system, like I mentioned before, as well. We also took from North Dakota, which has the public bank of North Dakota, which I can talk about in a little bit. But a lot of what we borrowed from is actually South Dakota, because South Dakota has the most assets under management of any state chartered institutions. So basically, we mixed and matched the best of both worlds and all of that there. And because if we have this public bank, we can kind of serve as a bank of banks and a really nimble regulator to move forward with that. And just to mention some progress to date, we have our banking commission fully set up, and we have received applications from individual organizations looking to secure a charter.
Congratulations. It's actually quite awesome. I would like to touch upon now some of the so most of our people who are listening here, they're probably a programmer, a designer, a small entrepreneur, someone who's doing maybe like Amazon FBA or drop shipping or online course and so on. And while the regulations for digital assets and finance, etc., are very interesting and also useful for them in terms of protection, in terms of their day-to-day of operating an LLC, I think like the main question is really going to be about, what's the taxes and what's the banking like. So first of all, regarding taxes, is there a state tax? Is there like a tribal tax for Catawba incorporated jurisdictions?
So the only tribal tax is just the annual renewal fee and the opening fee.
Okay,
And in
and
terms
these
of
are in line with other states, or
it's cheaper than other states, I would say. And you have the prices that you've already given your clients on that, so you can provide that information if you want.
yes. The franchise tax, not a thing also. So
Well,
cheaper than Delaware.
they will be the same price for franchise taxes for C corps. For LLCs, they usually have a flat rate across U.S. states. We tend to charge at a well, if you want me to talk about the prices, it's $100 annual renewal and $250 for the opening fee.
Okay, so in this case, way cheaper than Delaware's 400.
Yeah.
And so in terms of the entities, this is a question that there's a reason we're only recording this podcast this year, but like, are you able to open single member LLCs for foreigners as well, or only for US residents and US persons?
No, I mean, just the same extent you can do that in Delaware, you can do that, here. You can set up a sole proprietorship, that's no problem. And yeah, in terms of, just setting it up, you get an EIN. You can you can independently go to, most financial institutions. You might have to explain if they haven't had a direct relationship with us before about what exactly Catawba is, and when you're showing them your certificate of organization, what have you. We've also established relationships with existing banks in case y'all want introduction, you want a more streamlined approach there, so we can connect you with all to set up a US bank account. But yeah, I mean, you have to pass our KYC and AML system before you get approved to be able to set up a company. And then when you set up a financial institution, meaning set up a bank account, they will also do their own KYC on you as well. But pending all that, even if you live abroad, just like you can with a Delaware company, you should be able to set up an account.
Fantastic, and I think that's a big point also regarding the Catawba platform, because we as Settee have an account there for like incorporating LLCs, and Jesus Christ, the difference in the cleanliness of the UI if you compare like to, I don't know, Sunbiz, like the Florida registry, or the other registries, like all these other websites, it looked like they were made in 2007, 2009. I don't know. Like it's, I don't know why other jurisdictions don't think about just the usability and how nice it is to have like a SaaS-like platform like you guys did.
They don't really have the incentive to. When you have a special economic zone, you have a lot more incentive to make sure that the customer experience is as enjoyable and as streamlined as possible. But a state, even a large one like Wyoming, where they have only 300,000 residents, they have plenty of other streams of revenue, and also, you know, a large organization like that has a monopoly over a large period of time. They're not going to be as hungry to make sure that their customers, the people that they govern, are the people that are happy with their experience.
And one thing about the acceptance for banking and so on, because on the so you guys can also provide the register agent and register address, and I noticed that the address says I think it was North or South Carolina, but it was I think North Carolina.
Yes.
So, like on the address perspective, just showing the address of your LLC, it doesn't say like, oh, Catawba Indian tribe as something that would call attention for the intents and purposes of, oh, here's the mailing address of my LLC. It's just as if it were a North Carolina LLC, no?
Yeah, I mean, so the postal system in the United States is based off of states and state addresses. So they don't have specific addresses for reservations or what have you. So that's why it's written as North Carolina.
Because for online banking, right? For I don't know, Mercury or for Kraken or etc. Then whenever they ask for the address, it would just show up as a regular LLC. So I think there wouldn't even be questions about like the tribal status. No.
Well, I mean, so often if you're setting up a corporate account, they're going to also ask for your corporate documents as well. So if you'll probably have to explain it in that case if they do.
That makes sense. And you at you mentioned you already have established relationships with some banks. Uh, are these banks that you can open accounts remotely, and are any of them crypto friendly by any chance?
Yeah, so you can open up them both remotely. Yeah, I mean, so one that we have a close relationship is FV Bank, so you can reach out to them if you're interested in crypto-specific business. You can also go with Pinnacle Bank, which is actually located here in the South. They're not as crypto focused, so if you have a standard business or a standard LLC, for freelancing and stuff like that, they're fantastic, and we can get that, taken care of remotely.
I'm gonna share those two links here on the comments as well. That's FV Bank and that's Pinnacle Bank. Both take Catawba LLCs.
Yeah, and people
Okay.
have independently set up accounts at, let's say, Citibank and Truist and what have you, and have even gotten interest from Merrill Lynch and what have you to set up larger accounts. So, it's possible to set it up and a lot of different credit unions. So, independently, if you have a preferred bank that you already have a relationship with, you can pursue that as well. But we just have some options that are, very familiar with the Catawba, corporate documents, etc.
Okay. That's really good, actually. And so we already have an exchange, a crypto-friendly bank, and a non-crypto-friendly bank. So that basically covers like the main verticals of people doing business internationally. And then again, right, for all intents and purposes, this is a U.S. LLC. It still has access to all of these platforms that the United States has access to. So, Stripe, PayPal, Wise, etc. All of these payment processors and EMIs, they're still available normally.
Yeah, I mean, we use Stripe for our company, and it's even a weirder situation. It's not an LLC; it's actually uh, uh, a uh, a statute incorporated entity. But we're able to set it up with Stripe and what have you to process payments.
That's awesome. And then you mentioned that one of the main reasons that people go to Delaware is like the dispute resolution, right? The what happens when there are problems. How does Catawba deal with this? What is the procedure there if there's any disputes within Catawba?
Yeah, I mean, so like in any contract, you can put a choice of venue, which could be arbitration or a federal court or what have you. But ultimately, that decision can be reviewed and appealed to in the Catawba court because they have exclusive and appellate jurisdiction for that. You could also make the choice of venue directly the Catawba court, which is fully stood up, and then you could present your case to the judges there.
Okay. Have there already been many precedent cases within the Catawba court, or so far no problems?
No problem so far. Our code does allow for you to, refer to the case law of different jurisdictions. So if you want to provide some clarity on that and check with your attorneys, but you could also include, we can, for guidance, we can refer to precedents from, let's say, Delaware or what have you. But yeah, the Catawba
Okay.
court was just set up fairly recently. But also, in addition to that, our corporate code and commercial code, you're probably familiar with this, Francisco, because you're in the space. It's based off of ULEX, which is Tom W. Bell's collection of different documents from the restatements of common law, from Law Commission, what have you. And the restatements of common law, they're very interesting. They synthesize common law rulings from across the world in the United States, and they synthesize them into what they call black letter rulings. So built within that code is already hundreds, if not thousands, of years of common law precedent directly into that. So as a very baseline, they have a lot of that case law and precedent baked into it.
Yes, Ulix is really cool, by the way. Everyone should, if you're interested in this, they have a GitHub even. It's, they're Tom Bell made it to be like a system for dispute resolutions and for yes, like how do you say, like an open source legal system. That's the definition that he had given for it. Yeah. And just to understand, like, when thinking of the incentives here, because you mentioned multiple times that Catawba is the Catawba Digital Economic Zone is a private entity, so you're a for-profit company.
Well, some clarity is needed there. Yeah, so let me, sorry to interrupt, but so there's two different entities that the zone created. One is the regulatory body, which is actually an instrumentality. It is part of the government, and that is run by that nimble 5-person commission of Catawba citizens. Those are the ones that are actually implementing regulation and enforcing it, etc. How the for-profit aspect of it works is that there's also a management company, and this is a fairly common structure within special economic zones. That entity is still majority owned by the Catawba Indian Nation with majority board control, but there's also private participation as well. And that entity is responsible for business development, software development, marketing, and what have you, and helping support and develop the special economic zone. So that's where sort of that model comes into play. But ultimately, the entity that's actually putting down rules and regulations is part of the sovereign. They're the ones responsible for that. We are a supporting role to make that happen.
Okay, that's important also to maybe avoid conflicts of interest. But what was meaning to get here is in terms of when you profit, how does the Catawba Indian Nation profit? Because I think that's also very important for the long-term alignment. Are they directly shareholders within the for-profit entity?
Yeah, they own the majority of shares, and so whenever there's profits, it's distributed pro rata.
Nice. Are there any advantages or benefits if people want to do business with people from Catawba, so like hire local employees or something like this, or is it basically neutral?
From our case, if you actually hire them as a W-2, we'll actually waive your annual renewal fee. And on the federal level, there's actually a 20% tax credit, not just for salaries, but any healthcare expenses if you hire a Catawba citizen or any Native American tribal member for that matter. So that can be significant savings.
Okay, so there's the benefits already that we mentioned for the single member LLC, disregarded entity, etc. But also for those who want to set up offices and a full operation within the U.S., having that office within Catawba, hiring people from Catawba can give you tax benefits as well.
You don't even, so if you want those benefits, you don't even have to have an office. You can just hire the LLC can hire them as a W-2. But of course we're more than welcome to. We'll be happy to welcome y'all to an office space for sure.
Awesome. Dominic was asking here in the comments, are there any cons to incorporating an LLC in Catawba because he can only see benefits?
Well, I mean, you're asking a biased person, so I'm going to say no. I mean, all the downsides that are normally associated with running a business, they're here. I mean, ultimately, we are a U.S. company, and it's difficult to run a business. But yeah, in comparison to others, it's a lot better.
Mm-hmm. I guess, like, and I think you'll agree with on me with this, but this is a problem that's going to become smaller as time goes on. Is just the unfamiliarity of other institutions with Catawba, right? Like as more entities are incorporated in Catawba, then more people will be familiar with it. More people will be, um, will have experience working with it, so things will go smoother. But for now, I guess there's still a kind of, hey, what is this? What's the what's
Exactly.
the
That is the one thing, is just the education process. And this is pretty common when you're, breaking into a new industry. People forget how strange it was to jump in a stranger's car or to live in a stranger's house based on an app that they have online or on their phone. And there, if you look at the actual growth of Uber and Airbnb and what have you, for a while you saw like this sort of like middling growth precisely because it was so weird. But then you reach a critical mass of understanding, no, this is actually something that can happen, is actually better, and you start to get that hockey stick type growth. Because of that, that's one of the reasons why one of our investors actually advised Uber, Bradley Tusk, and helped scale it all across the world. And likewise, we expect something similar with Catawba, because when people think of tribes, they don't think about a government where you can incorporate entities. You think about gaming, you think about cannabis, you think about payday lending, and all the negative stereotypes, and that are completely unfair. But once we, reach that education point, then it's going to become commonplace.
Yeah, and that's something you guys are also working very actively on. I really like the fact that you're a jurisdiction that you're doing corporations, etc. But you have a Discord server and you have a Telegram group, and that's actually part of your own regulation making process, right? Like it's hearing from the suggestions of the community members. I don't think
Yeah.
that's like comparable in any other US state. Like which regulators are on a Discord server hearing what people would like to have, you know?
They may solicit for comments, but they certainly don't do it on Discord and Telegram, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's something that I find like just so important, is having this accessibility, this level of touch with the people who are behind the project. I think that helps build trust way more, right? And that also in other big projects, when you can see the people who are behind it, and they're sharing with you the roadmap, and hey, this is the next thing we're working on, this is the next thing we're working on. It's not like a secluded political bureaucratic process.
Right. No, yeah. Yeah, you have to see my face a couple of times. That's part of the process. Yeah.
Nice. And Catawba being a for-profit entity, if people believe in this project and they think, oh yeah, I think this is going to be successful, I think this is going to grow, is it possible to invest in Catawba, like not by opening a company but by investing like in the project itself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you take crypto?
Uh-huh. Yeah, we do.
Regarding the privacy, what's the situation in Catawba regarding is it a place where when you incorporate everyone can see who's behind the LLC, or do you have privacy at the member level?
Yeah, so we don't have a place where you could publicly see LLCs at this point, but what we're going to provide is a DID and verifiable credential for each company, so you can see that it's in good standing. It's a Catawba entity. You do have to make sure that, because we are a U.S. entity, you have to do that Corporate Transparency Act filing with FinCEN. So you
Vincent,
need to make sure for all beneficial owners, you need to file that, and we will still be providing that portal that will allow you to view the DIDs and VCs for all Catawba entities.
yeah, great. In any case, we include the FinCEN filing for all our LLC clients. So if you have an LLC with us, you don't have to really worry about that. We'll fill that over for you. But that's really good. Also, so there's going to be a verifiable register for the companies, but the member names, they're not going to be there in public if they don't want it to appear.
Exactly.
So similar to Wyoming or New Mexico, you have privacy at the shareholder level, and then as for our Brazilian audience here, since the U.S. is not part of the CRS, there's no double taxation agreement with Brazil, etc. There's also no information exchange at the banking level, which makes it a very discrete entity if we compare it to, say, like competitors in Europe, like Estonia or something like that. So if someone wants to incorporate in Catawba, what do they need? Is there any difference from other states, or what's a KYC process like? What do you have to show?
Well, yeah, you need to say who you are, where you live, and you need to take a selfie of yourself and a picture of your photo ID. And that's essentially it. They verify that based on databases that they get from governments or credit providers or what have you, and then they verify your identity and you're not on a watch list or what have you. And after that, you can enter the platform and then you can choose what legal entity you want. You can put in the name of the company or entity, and then you can put the preferred mailing address if you don't want it to be a virtual address. And if you're a DAO LLC, you have to put that public identifier, whether that's a URL to your white paper, whether it's a smart contract. And then after that, you pay. And then after that, you can, manage your company within the portal. You can have your corporate documents. You can add people to the cap table, what have you. Yeah, it's fairly straightforward.
So also for making changes to who's the shareholder, who's the member, etc., that can all be done fully online through the platform. No need to fax anything. No need to.
No fax.
Thank God. I wish the IRS were to get into a digital platform like that. Sadly, the EIN still requires the faxing of documents, but well, we take care of that as well. Dominic asked, out of curiosity, what would happen to the entities if Catawba, the managing company, goes bankrupt? Like, are there any potential risks regarding that?
Well, so it would continue to exist because it's a legal entity, and I don't foresee that we would go bankrupt. And also remember, there's the for-profit entity, but ultimately the rules and regulations are implemented by the zone authority, and that would exist with the Catawba nation and what have you.
So it's not like the companies would cease to exist if anything happened to Catawba, the management company.
I mean, no. Even in an absolute worst case scenario, they would exist for the 12 months after they were incorporated. So they wouldn't from one day to another just not exist. And the Catawba Indian Nation is not going anywhere.
That's true. Do you see any potential competition from other Indian tribes that, like these guys are doing something here? Like maybe we could start our own digital economic zone. Do you think you guys have a strong moat?
Yeah, I mean, there's potential for that, but people underestimate how hard this is. And the expertise that's needed to make it, and also being first to market and developing a network effect that's very powerful, especially with these digital platforms.
Yeah, I think once you have a mass there, it's very hard for someone to be like. The thing also is, right, you have the first mover advantage, you already have the community, you have the network, and you have 1 day incorporation, cheap prices, digital platform, etc. Like, what else can they offer that you don't already offer? Right?
Exactly.
It's a hard one. One last question: do you guys have any restrictions for specific markets? So thinking here, if someone wants to do something related to adult entertainment, etc., Florida is usually a top choice. If anyone wants to do stuff related to gambling, then maybe Nevada, or like cannabis, Colorado. So in these high risk fields, which ones are Catawba suitable, which ones are not Catawba suitable due to your regulations?
So we don't have any current regulations about those fields. If you do have any questions, though, one of the benefits of us being a nimble body is that you can actually talk directly to us and have a conversation, and we'll respond quickly. Okay. So if you have any questions, we're more than happy to talk.
Okay, but so as there have been no regulations in any of these fields, I imagine like the priority is not it's to focus on like crypto or on other scalable business without like focusing on, let's say, like adult entertainment or like higher risk areas.
Yeah, I mean, so there aren't any rules prohibiting that right now, and so long as there isn't any federal laws, I don't foresee that as a problem, but the devil's in the details, obviously.
Mhm.
So feel free to reach out to us. Gaming specifically, um, with the tribe's jurisdiction with gaming, that's specifically for the tribe based on their framework.
Okay.
So I don't think you can do any gaming within us. But the other stuff, I don't think, yeah, talk to us,
Like,
but I don't believe there's any regulations prohibiting them on the Catawba level.
yeah, just in this case, it's more permission by omission, right? As long as there is no prohibition, then in principle you should be fine. But first, talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have what they call a regulatory sandbox within our code that says, so long as it's not prohibited by the code, you can move forward with it. But just to make sure that you're doing DD, talk to an attorney and feel free to talk to us, and then we can make sure that you're just super tight and ready to go, so that you can have the most legal stability possible.
Okay. And then again, like, should there be a need for new regulation, the waiting time is not 1, 2 years. It's what, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months.
Exactly, and like mentioned before, we have a comment period. So you, as a community, have the right to go and comment and provide suggestions specifically for how rules and regulations that would affect the zone actually, go about.
Fantastic. Cool. I think those were my main questions regarding Catawba and how it works. Do you have any last comments or message that you'd like to leave to our audience regarding Catawba or startup societies in general? And also, please do let us know where they can find more about Catawba and about your work.
Absolutely. Well, basically, go to catawbadigital.zone in order to register, and you can find there everything about our regulations or FAQs and what have you. If you want to learn more about the space of special jurisdictions, go to startupsocieties.network, and you can learn about all our different initiatives, including the book and journal. And yeah, I would just say, um, what is beautiful about Catawba is that there's been historical injustices of what was perceived of as a more economically and technologically advanced group was able to subjugate what was seen as a less technologically advanced, and because of that, tribes lost sovereignty in a sense. And what this is showing is that tribes can grow into their already existing sovereignty in ways that haven't been practiced before by harnessing the power of markets and rule of law and technology. And by being a part of that, you are leading towards that sort of historical justice as well as providing a space where you and your business can thrive. So yeah, we're excited to invite you and host you in the zone.
And there's the social moral argument there as well, right?
Yeah, you're obligated. You're morally obligated, or you're a bad person. That's what I'm saying. No, just joking. Um, very cool.
Awesome. And yeah, for anyone that wants to incorporate an LLC in Catawba, check out the Catawba Digital Zone website, but also feel free to reach out to us. We have a complete LLC opening service that also covers Catawba. So besides the incorporation and the register agent and the register address that you could also get directly at the Catawba platform, we take care of the EIN application, the ITIN application if you want a personal number for yourself for your credit, the Form 5472 and 1120 as a non-resident that you have to submit, FinCEN filing, the Corporate Transparency Act, and also just annual report and the general compliance and banking support. So feel free to, we'll leave the link down here. Also to our article on Catawba, so if you want that info on tax, we have a very thorough breakdown of the advantages that you have in Catawba. And yeah, that's it. We'll leave all the information on the link to Catawba, the LLC, etc. That was it for today. Joe, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure having you here for our first podcast in English with such a great guest. And this podcast will air on this Sunday, so it should come out on the 7th of April. As soon as it's online, I'll send you the link.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Bom dia.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everyone who's listening here, and have a great day.